The push for peace around the globe is gaining momentum. Joining me now to talk about it is Victoria Coates, former Deputy National Security Advisor, and Aaron Cohen, Israeli Special Ops veteran and host of the Aaron Cohen Show podcast. Good to see you both. Victoria, first to you, that the Ukrainian ambassador to the United States was clear that what we have seen so far, the outline of this peace plan, is pretty vague. I just want to play a little bit of what she said about it yesterday. Roll it.
This is again, a wish list, a list of points. It's not an agreement, so the agreement should be as precise as possible. This, additionally to 28 points, there is a security assurances proposal from U.S. on the table, and it all should be embodied in the agreement. So teams are still working in Switzerland. Not yet final statements have been done.
So how might this agreement, proposals, however you want to describe it, how might it change over the coming days?
Oh, I think, of course, it'll change, David. And it's good to be with you and with Aaron. What the president put on the table over the weekend was an opening proposal, and he was clear about that the Ukrainians would come, they would negotiate their side of things. There would be discussions between the Secretary of State and President Zelensky's chief of staff, who's the head of their delegation, and they will get to a durable peace. I think the model for this is what he did in September with the 20-point plan to end the war in Gaza, but then to build toward a lasting broader peace in the Middle East. And he got everybody's sign off on it in a just historic outburst of diplomacy at the United Nations. Best thing ever to come out of the United Nations General Assembly. But that's the kind of momentum he has going into this. And I think what Putin's going to find, especially after the call between President Trump and President Xi today, he may be the odd man out unless he comes to the table.
Aaron, this is a war of attrition. I mean, there's just minimal progress that is being made by Russians over the past few months. Meanwhile, thousands and thousands of Russian soldiers have died. By the way, in the whole of Afghanistan, which eventually one of the factors that led to the end of the Soviet Union, there were 15,000 Russians killed in that. So far, estimates are that between 200,000 and 350,000 Russian troops have died as a result of the Ukrainian war. How much more of this can Putin take?
Well, David, it's good to see you, my friends. I think Russia is getting tired. I think everybody is getting tired of the last 3 years here. And here's where I'm at with this. I think that the biggest shift in these peace talks is that they're finally being shaped by American strength again. And I think that everybody sees that. And the Geneva session just produced what Rubio called a tremendous amount of progress. And I think Russia and Putin is really exhausted. And that only happened because the U.S. reasserted itself and put a real framework into place. This thing's been for 3 years with zero direction. So now there's a structure. There seems to be some kind of timeline that's coming together. And in my opinion, that only happens when American leadership steps in and pushes for results. So there's a framework that's coming together. And I think that deadline is because President Trump is finally taking control of this thing, and it should have happened a long time ago.
Aaron, I want to keep with you for a second on the Mideast, because we had something happen over the weekend where a major Hezbollah commander was killed in Lebanon. His name is Hassan Ali Tabatabai, I think is his name. I mean, what is happening in Lebanon now? Has Hezbollah lost control of that country, which they were controlling via the money that was coming in from Iran?
Yeah, that's a good question. So Israel, even though there was some type of formal agreement, Israel has dismantled Hezbollah and has really fractured the IRGC's ability to be able to have Hezbollah deployed in that forward operating area. But Israel will continue to put out actionable operations based on real-time intelligence the moment they have an opportunity. They know that Hezbollah is going to keep pushing forward. And that number 2 target was a big hit. So Israel quietly will continue with special operations. Yeah. They're going to continue to put pressure because it just keeps pushing the IRGC backwards. And so anytime there's a little nugget, David, Israel's not going to wait. They're going to pop and continue to cut the heads off that snake the moment there's an opportunity. It's the only way to keep this forward pressure going This is the next decade of what this is going to look like.
Victoria, I'm getting a wrap already, but I have to ask you about the realignment, the Trump realignment of the Middle East right now. In my eyes, I've been around for a while. I've seen a lot of changes in the Middle East, but this is the most significant change I think I have ever seen. When you look at the way in which Trump has managed to get the Arab world aligned in the same way we would like things to be aligned vis-a-vis Israel and its battle with terrorism.
Absolutely, David. It is historic how President Trump picked up right where he left off at the end of 2020 with the Abraham Accords, the first peace deal between Israel and Muslim-majority countries in 25 years, with UAE, Bahrain, Morocco. And just last week, we had the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia sitting in the Oval Office saying Saudi Arabia wants to be part of the Abraham Accords. It's when, not if, they're going to do it. Huge realignment, massively in the best interests of not just Israel, but first and foremost of the United States.
Victoria Coates, Aaron Cohen, I wish I had more time. You two are fabulous. Good to see you both. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you.